Welcome again to the 30-Minute Podcast. The 30-Minute Podcast that provides full topics in half an hour for the intellectually curious. This season, we are continuing the Emancipation series and exploring 6 facets of emancipation: education, entrepreneurship, evaluation, economics, eroticism, and today's subject, entertainment. We know that entertainment is a huge concept and contains many genres or areas of exploration. This episode will look at the emancipation of our guest in balancing the notion of dwelling within a confinement versus being confined, or being in the cage versus being caged, on today's 30-Minute Podcast.
Welcome to the first ever 30-Minute Podcast radio with our special guest, Miss Tiffini Rose. So how's it going today?
It's going.
There's a lot going on, right?
It's a lot going on. It's a very interesting time, to say the least.
Right. And so how has that impacted you as an entertainer? Let's just jump right into it.
Well, it shut it down completely. Well, I've had a gig since March, but it completely shut down the venues, especially with the city mandates. And so there was no music, and it was across the board. It didn't matter what level of music you were on. People weren't touring. They weren't gigging. The only gigs people still had, for the most part, were churches, if the churches kept their musicians. So it shut music down in Atlanta completely.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because my church did a virtual choir, and it was the most beautiful thing I'd seen, with like 80 people.
Right.
Oh, that was so beautiful. But I was like, man, that took a lot of technology. They're spending all their money on tech trying to pull it off. But I mean, they did a great job. So shout out to Word of Faith. Anyways, so
right.
Let's talk about the emancipation topic and how that relates to the music industry. So there's a famous quote from, well, first of all, there's Andre Leon Talley, who you may know as a journalist and with Vogue for many, many years and a fashion icon. He has a lot of quotes, so let me just start there. But one of his really interesting, and I call it famous quote, he talked about emancipation in terms of entertainment, and that entertainment emancipates people. And so we want to get your take on that.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a scientist by trade, so I have a couple of degrees, and, I had in my mind that I was going to, go to medical school, and I changed my mind and ended up going into education. And I spent all these years honing that skill, but I had this talent that I didn't use at all. And in fact, my ex-husband's family didn't even know I sing, because I would only sing around our children and his parents. It started with a local singer that I enjoyed her and went to see her, and she ended up coming to my church, and I would sing on the praise team, but I'm a teacher. Like, I don't do anything like, I'm not a singer or anything like that in my head. And every time I would go see her perform, she would throw me on the mic and say, she thinks that she's a background singer and not a singer, and she really is. And I really enjoyed her and wanted to support her, but I didn't want to be on stage. And every time I went, it would happen. So I said, okay, let me figure this thing out. It snowballed. People always say, well, how did you, know you want to be a singer? I said, I didn't. It's not on my vision board. I have a degree in biology with a double minor in chemistry and history. It was never, I said, God put it on my vision board. And so I had vocal nodules from teaching, and I promised God if he would give me my voice back, I would walk into any opportunity. And that's what happened. And it ended up being my therapy. I was under a lot of stress, ironically, when I was teaching at the time, and I was having severe anxiety issues, and I had started performing, and it was so therapeutic. It's actually in my medical documentation that even if I'm too sick to work, I should be allowed to sing, because it's that freeing for me. And it became my safe place.
Literally emancipating, health-wise, mentally, physically, using your voice.
Absolutely. And I never planned on doing anything with it. It was just, I come from a musical family like the Winans. Nobody's famous. I honestly thought all Black people could sing until I was probably like high school, because my second cousins, third cousins could sing. And so it wasn't anything special.
So let's clear that myth up right
Right.
No, they cannot.
Ooh, yeah.
I know now.
Ooh, yeah.
Except
Dalvin.
There you go.
You better give
Right.
Dalvin his
Dalvin.
respect. Mr. Dalvin.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about that. You are you bringing up education, and you're an educator, and you're still an educator.
Yes.
Correct? Okay. So how does that translate into the classroom?
So it definitely changed my perspective on what I tell my students. There's a young lady, her name is Amitra Doc, shout out to Mimi. And she is a big proponent of, we've been blessed with multiple talents and we tend to focus on one. Like I'm very book smart. So that's what I focused on. And she says to be a complete person, you should really develop all of your talents. And so I went from, prior to performing, you need to go to college, you need, or go to trade school, and now I find myself encouraging my students to pursue their creative side or pursue their dreams, but you need something to feed you until your dream can feed you. And so it totally changed my perspective because I had a very textbook, you go to college, you get a degree, and that's what you do. And now, I, encourage them to explore options in their dreams because there are careers in that and pursue all of it. Who says you can't, be a scientist and a singer? Who says you can't be a scholar and creative? Because you're incomplete. I found that I'm incomplete when I don't do both. I had a year where I had some severe health issues, and ironically, I had permission from my doctors to perform, and the science part was missing. So I still was incomplete because I had this knowledge base, and that I wasn't using. So I know that my happiness is somewhere in the middle.
So you would kind of describe yourself as a STEAM educator.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You believe in adding that art into the...
Absolutely.
And for those that don't know, science, technology, engineering,
right,
arts, and math.
Right.
Mathematics. So how do you feel, or do you feel that you're an emancipator in the classroom as well as on stage? And if so, how would you describe, if you were to say you're an emancipator, how would you describe it? Or if somebody asked you, you're an emancipator, tell me why. How would you answer that?
Well, I would say I'm an emancipator because I encourage students to free their thinking, because a lot of times we're trapped by the confines of our minds. And so emancipating them to say, it's okay if you want to do these non-traditional jobs. It's okay. But have something I'm one of those, have something to fall back on, be duplistic so that you can survive and feed your family with this dream that you have, until you achieve it. And so in the classroom, I'm not as restrictive, so it's not like, a lot of kids now want YouTube channels. They want to get famous on that, and college is out the window, or, education is not important. And it's like, no, they're both important. Do both. Who said you're very bright? Why not pursue both? And so opening their minds up to, because they're thinking just entertainment. And it's like, no, you're intelligent enough to do both. Why not? Multiple streams of income. We tell them you can do it, anything you want to do, but actually giving permission, because a lot of times we don't have permission to pursue it. And then musically, as an emancipator, I think, going into the music industry, I'm not the typical singer. I have a career, when the gigging stopped, I still had a salary. Whereas, my band, a lot of people, their income stopped. It was a way to say, hey, look, listen. And there are people who think that I'm not serious because I have a day job. I'm not buying into the dream. And it's like, no, my dream has insurance. You know what I'm saying? So, so I want to be able to sing and perform and free myself, because that's a very emotional and just, it's hard to describe. It's just, I'm a people person. It lets me interact with people. I love music. I'm a viber. My style is, there's someone that calls me the mashup queen, because, I'll mix songs together. I'll hear different things. And it's just, people don't expect that. Like when I get on stage, I'm a performer. So they don't expect me to be this, oh, she's a National Merit Scholar. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's like, all of these things. And it's like, hey, you can do that too. If you have a creative side, you don't have to shut it down because you have a business aspect or, you're in this career. So it's just like, hey, just, who are you? What are all your aspects, and pursue them.
So do you think that translates also to adults at this point? And the reason for the question is, yes, we are focused on the youth. They're the next generation, and we need to do everything we can to foster their creativity and their aspirations.
Mm-hmm.
But in these COVID times, there's a lot of people reevaluating their careers because they've been furloughed or their job has, as you said, come to an end. They don't have the income and they're just looking. What's some of the ways you think people can better assess their talents?
Well, just to sit back and think about what makes you happy. If music makes you happy, what about music makes you happy? Or are there things that you wanted to pursue and you never did? If you always want to learn piano, I know a lot of people who picked up new hobbies because there was so much free time. And so I think it's almost even more so important as adults because of the way we were brought up that we didn't have that freedom. Just finding your niche and just really thinking about the things that bring you joy or the things that you used to do when you were younger that you've kind of put to the side and bringing that back because maybe part of your stress is that you're not being your true authentic self because you've shut these doors in your life.
And so let's touch on that a little bit more because you referenced earlier having permission.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are you in reference to there?
Well, a lot of times our mindsets are tied to how we were raised. And so, I have a very creative family, but nobody pursued it. And so, my mother, she's still mad. I was supposed to go to medical school. I deviated off the path, but both my parents are educators. But I really think that was what I'm supposed to do. But to her, I've fallen short, and which is ironic because she is an educator. But there's no way I could have pursued music in the family that I was in. And so, and even she's kind of like, wow, I didn't know, I knew you could sing, but I didn't know you could do that with it. And so that permission, to step outside the box that we were raised in, the box that society said we were supposed to be in. Because, growing up, I remember there were creatives and there were academics.
Right.
And you didn't see them cross paths.
You didn't.
I love all creatives. So I'm subject to hang with the artists and the spoken word artists and they're all brilliant. You know what I'm saying? A lot of them are, scholars in their own right. And so, but we tend to separate them and they're all intertwined. And so the permission to truly pursue the creative and to be okay.
Well, I have a question going back to, you said the members of your band and other fellow musicians having trouble because their income just stopped. So how would you say that these times have changed your outlook on music, or have these times changed your outlook on music?
I think it made me very grateful for the path I took because I used to catch a lot of heat for having a career and, and then my band was doing very well and I was working a lot. And there were people who felt like I was taking gigs out of people's hands because I had a day job. So I'm not serious. And I'm serious about both of them. Even when I get on the mic, I tell people I have 2 full-time jobs. And so a lot of people who knew me were like, maybe Tiffini's doing it right by having, a day job. And because I know a lot of people think about getting out music altogether,
right?
Because there was no income. It abruptly shut down. And so there are a lot of people now who are not looking at me crazy, and saying, well, maybe there is something to, maybe I can do this and have a day job, or maybe I can have something more solid and still be a creative and still be serious about this. So I found that I have fewer naysayers now because stability is a thing. When COVID came, it didn't care.
So if I can, let me flip that. Since you named Coco, I affectionately call it Coco.
Yes.
So since Coco is in Atlanta and worldwide and nationwide, how do you think music has affected your outlook on Coco?
I don't know if music's affected my outlook or Coco's affected my outlook on music, because there's a part of me now that's itemizing the money. Is it worth it? Is it worth the risk? I have been turning down gigs because when you think about, I've always been in a position to be able to take gigs and leave them because I had other income. A lot of artists aren't in that position. And so I find myself now I'm okay with not performing. I miss it, but I don't miss it at the expense of my family or my health. And so, because I can think of a singer right now that was taking gigs and she ended up in the hospital with COVID. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
So a lot of these venues, there's no social distancing. It's hypothetical and people aren't. So I think Coco has kind of made me say, like, I love music from home for right now.
Yeah.
Well, there's always other avenues to you can still do. I have said that I would like some, I won't call them unsung, but maybe some next. You know how they have like the cipher?
The verses.
The verses and the cipher. I'm going to name one by name. I actually would want to see Algebra against, maybe against Stacey.
Al's been doing them.
Well, I know, but I want to see her against Stacey. Like I got the two.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
I want to see Stacey versus Algebra. Something like that. Everybody's this and that, but there's so many singers on so many levels that are in so many genres that have so many different accolades,
right?
That really, have some talent on a different level. I think there's other ways to make it.
And people have been doing it virtually. I know some people were like doing, they sold tickets to the virtual shows and things like that. I found for me, Coco kind of shut me down. I didn't listen to music. I wasn't humming. I wasn't singing for a good block. It just kind of shut me down completely. And I actually couldn't watch. So my friends were doing, the live things and performing. I just would scroll by. I don't know what it was. It was kind of like a traumatic, I just didn't want any music. I don't know. And a lot of people are like, oh, this is the time to be creative. And I'm like, I'm not creative. I don't feel like writing. I don't feel like doing anything. I just kind of felt like everything was just like the rug had been pulled from under me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people felt that way, and some still do, because it's a total change. It was like from 1 week, business as usual, next week, shut down, don't go out your house, don't do this, don't do that. And so, yeah, that's an abrupt change that takes some time to kind of come down and decompress.
Right.
Basically. So I can understand how you totally just needed a moment.
Right. And I went from gigging, I had a gig every Saturday. I had a gig every Wednesday for 3 years, so I was, multiple gigs a week. I would, run out of work. Everybody knew after 4:00 I wasn't a teacher, run home, get dressed and go perform. And then all that abruptly stopped. And it was just like, I couldn't, I don't know. It was almost like I got it broke up with me. And I was mourning, like the music broke up with me, and I just couldn't bring myself to listen or be creative.
So what are some of the best places that you would recommend to our listeners to get involved with independent artists such as yourself? Because there's a lot of artists, there's a lot of music, there's so many different genres. What would you recommend?
Of course, the live music venues here in Atlanta. Of course, I got to shout out Whiskey Mistress. Because I was there every Saturday. And they actually have I think they do live music on Wednesdays. They have artists that come in. They're trying to social distance. I know Cat's Cafe, shout out to Cat, that's the homie. They brought back their open mic on Thursday, with restrictions. And so there are a lot of places that it's the open mic, you get a lot of different artists. You get seasoned, you get newbies, St. James Live. So there are some venues that are great places to hear the local artists here in Atlanta. It's just kind of finding which one fits what you're trying to do, because some of them are more geared towards younger crowds. I think South Beach, they have a band, shout out to Jock, but it just depends on what your crowd is and what you're willing to do, especially in the middle of a pandemic. But a lot of the artists are doing things virtually. They're singing. If you follow them on their page, they'll give you excerpts or do songs or do living room shows with acoustic guitars and things like that. So there's a way to kind of follow your favorite artist here in Atlanta.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, we're gonna do something a little different. We call this 30-minute radio. This is the 30-minute radio show. So we're going to take a quick break to give a shout out to our small business spotlight. And when we come back, we're going to have a little surprise for the listeners today.
Affirm, plan, and execute your personal and professional life in excellence. Discover the perfect Leading Through Living seminar for you and work with Lanita Mitchell-Blackwell, Supreme Performance Coach. Find them online, Leading Through Living on Instagram, LanitaMitchellBlackwell.com, or the Leading Through Living app, available on Apple Store and Google Play. Leading Through Living.
We're back on the 30-minute podcast, full topics in half an hour. It is the IZZ along with Mariposa and our special guest, Tiffini Rose. And once again, like I told the listeners, we are having 30-minute radio today, 30-minute pod radio. So before we give them this special treat, is there anywhere that I know that you said you're not right now, you're not at Whiskey Mistress, you're not doing any of taking any gigs, but if somebody wanted to hear you, who is Tiffini Rose? If they wanted to, wanted to hit that Jill Scott, who is Tiffini? So can you tell them where they can find you on social media, on the media outlets?
So Tiffini Rose like the flower. It's Tiffini with all eyes, Tiffini, Rose like the flower. There is a Tiffini Rose IG page, my business page, and I also have a YouTube channel, same spelling, Tiffini with all eyes, where I have some videos from different shows that I've uploaded. And I kind of send my clients there when they need to see some videos.
And I'll spell that one more time because even I sometimes Tiffini Rose. Tiffini, all eyes.
All eyes.
And then Rose like the flower.
Yes. My mother said literary license. She did.
So I love to hear you sing. Some of the wonderful people that have supported you over the years love to hear you sing. So if you would, I would like for the listeners to get a glimpse into who is Tiffini Rose. So Tiffini Rose.
Like the flower.
Can you give them a little something?
Sure. Let's see. Probably one of my favorite, call it warm-up songs. I like to start my gigs with this if there's a dinner set. You're rolling the way that I move, and I breathe your air. Only you can rescue me. This is my prayer. Oh, if you were mine, oh, if you were mine, I wouldn't want to go to heaven. No, this is no ordinary love. No ordinary love. No, this is no ordinary love. No ordinary love. I had to snap to and because it's no ordinary love, so I have to cherish the day. I won't go astray. I won't be afraid. You won't catch me running. You're rolling away that I move.
Yes. Hit them with a little bit of Sade, the T Rose mix. All I mix. So, hey, I appreciate you coming on.
Welcome.
With this Emancipation series talking about entertainment, the facet of entertainment. It is the IZZ, Mariposa, and our special guest,
Tiffini Rose like the flower.
30-minute podcast. See you next time. Peace.